Are you a woman in the corporate world striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cece George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lowndes, CEO and founder, imposter syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lowndes Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time. Welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. Today, we are honored to be joined by Shani Taylor. So Shani Taylor, at 23 years old, became a single mum to her beautiful son, Oscar, who has been her driving force for change and to become the best version of herself that she can be. Now, in 2011, Shani was held in a house under duress for 2 days by a family member and repeatedly sexually assaulted, leaving her with PTSD so bad that at one point she wouldn't even leave the house. But determined to create a better life for herself and her son and eventually the world, she started her business in 2020 and in her first 30 days in business generated 5 figures in revenue, and in her first year created over 350,000. And by the second year, she became the 7-figure success that she is today. Now, she's also written a book, From Ignored to Adored, and spoken on global stages with celebrities like Vince Vaughn, Elizabeth Hurley, and multiple other people. She's been crowned Global Coach of the Year as awarded by the Duchess of York and has clients in 24 countries. She is now privileged to be serving and heart-centered business owners all around the world, guiding them to expand themselves, their businesses, and to have massive impact. And her motto is simple: anchor in action, and you too can have it all. Wow. Inspiring or what? Thank you for joining us here on the podcast today, Shani.
I feel inspired by the way you spoke and delivered that, Rach. That was beautiful. Oh, who is this woman? She sounds amazing.
It's you.
That is amazing. That is really quite a lofty introduction, isn't it? I mean, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I was listening to all the accolades that Rachel just gave you, and rightfully so, and thinking, wow, I really need to step up my game. That is really impressive. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
It's really amazing that you say that, because I constantly am thinking about how I'm not doing enough and haven't done enough. And we just had Rachel was just inside of we just had an end of year party inside of my community like half an hour ago. We finished up, and it was just so fascinating to hear some of the things that people were saying about the impact that I'd had on their life this year, because I honestly spend most of my time thinking, how am I ever going to be amazing? And how am I ever going to achieve massive success? Because I just constantly feel like it's not enough. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Shani is unbelievable, right? To be honest. And like, don't get me wrong, she is a powerhouse. She's going to call you out on your BS. No question about it. But she's awesome. And, you know, Shani, we just touched on there that you have had quite an interesting journey from early adulthood to now. So can you tell our listeners a bit more about your inspiring journey from ignored to adored, and like kind of what caused you to be as successful as you are? What's your driving force?
It's so interesting because I think from a young age, I really knew that I was meant for more. And I'm sure you can relate, right? Like I was looking around at the people that I was coexisting with, and I really felt like an alien. And I'm talking about family, and I'm talking about the school system, and, you know, all of those types of things. And I really knew that I was meant for more, but I don't think I realized, but everything kind of felt like, what's the point? You know, all of the struggles, all of the challenges. And it's really only been this year where I've realized that my story is the magic. You know, yeah, I go and I teach business, but actually all of the like really, and I think I'm just emotional because we've just had a really emotional day because it's like the end of the year in my community. But I don't know, it's just kind of like all of the really difficult things that we go through in our life, we never realize at the time how they're serving us. And sometimes we won't even realize until many years later. And I knew that my story and the things that had happened to me were important, but it really feels like I've had to fight for other people to see that they were important. And now, you know, I come onto a conversation like this and, you know, you guys are like, that's so amazing, but that's not how people used to engage with me. And, you know, I shared a video in one of my sessions yesterday with my community of Ed Sheeran, and he was talking about in 5 years, he went from playing a song that nobody cared about to all of a sudden the whole world loves this song now. And he was talking about the fact that he had to fight to be seen and fight to be heard and fight to be understood. And now all of a sudden everybody thinks he's amazing. And I guess the reason I'm sharing that is because for people who are listening and right now, they just feel so alone and they feel so misunderstood. The work for you is to keep believing in you first, because the rest of the world will eventually catch up.
Oh,
Well said.
that.
Honestly, I
Love
can't
that.
think of a better way to tee up this entire conversation. And much of what you said resonated with me, especially, you know, something that I've always thought about in terms of my trajectory for my career, for my life. And I've said this to a lot of people, is that I always feel like there's this hidden potential. I know it's there. And at times I really feel like it's bubbling up to the surface. And there is going to be this one point where it truly overflows. And it's something that I cannot describe except that I feel it with such passion and vigor. I feel it at times, even with the work that I do, I feel it coming up to the surface. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I have so much energy around this. And there is going to be a point where that truly just unlocks the magic within me into the world. And I really can picture what that looks like. And I just get so excited. So much of what you said really does resonate with me from that perspective.
What do you think that moment looks like when all of a sudden it locks into place?
For me, I would imagine that moment being transformative for the people that I'm working with. And I've had moments like that. So, for example, in the work that I do with leadership development and teaching and facilitating these meaningful, impactful conversations, when I look around the room and I'm gauging how people are receiving what I'm doing, I can see that the light bulbs are going off. And for me, I think that is so magical. It's what actually encourages me to keep pushing and to keep doing more in this space. So when I think about that moment when all of that inside bubbles over, I'm thinking about not just a classroom, but something bigger. Maybe it's a full auditorium. Maybe it's global reach. I'm not sure, but there is something meant for me, and it's much greater than I can possibly imagine.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Shani, I mean, you've obviously gone from your story is quite incredible, really. Like we only touched on a little part of it there, but I mean, I know you very well, so I know your story very well. And you've come from, I mean, you grew up in a very poor part of Sydney called Mount Druitt. Like, so the best way that we could probably talk about that is Compton, right? I know that you've used that example before. And so, you know, you're not given the best chances. And we know that people in lower socioeconomic society, you know, when they grow up in those kind of environments, don't necessarily succeed because you're not set up for success. Yet you have created like amazing success for yourself. And, you know, there's different parts of your layers to your story. But what I'm really interested in is like, how does someone go from Mount Druitt being an intravenous drug addict to being a multi-figure successful coach who is now hanging out with billionaires, millionaires, and celebrities? Like, what was the catalyst for you?
Oh my God, I don't know, but if you figure it out, could you let me know?
We were hoping you can tell us that.
Yeah, we want the Holy Grail.
Yes, the secret sauce.
I'm being facetious. It's a really great question, and I don't think we'd introduced in the conversation. I know you spoke about me being held in a house, but yeah, just for context. So I was born into poverty, and the best way to describe it is Compton, because the suburb of Mount Druitt here in Sydney still has the highest rate of homicide out of every suburb in the city itself, and that's been consistent since I was born in it 40 years ago. And it's quite interesting because I was in America on the weekend, and I was obviously spending time with Americans, and they said to me, you have, like, it's so hard to picture that you grew up in that environment because even your accent, you're very well spoken, which is fascinating to me to hear that I'm well spoken, because I mean, maybe I should go look for some audio from even 20 years, even 15 years ago, because this is not how I spoke. Right, because I spoke like what we would call here in Australia a feral. Like I mean, I lived on the streets at one point because I was kicked out of home at 16, and I lived on the streets. And as Rachel said, I picked up an intravenous drug addiction, so I was putting needles in my arm. So this is not the person that was doing that on the streets 20-ish years ago, right? And even sometimes I think I forget until I go looking for a photo and I go, who even is that girl? And actually, I remember Rachel in Sydney when we did an in-person event a couple of months ago, and I had a before and after, and you actually, you laughed, like you couldn't even keep it in. The change was so different.
Oh yeah, that photo, I was like, that isn't you, surely.
But I'll tell you, you asked the question what the catalyst was. And so I think everybody's looking for the one thing, right? And there's truly never one thing, but there was a catalyst. And the catalyst for me truly, and I don't know if we need to put a trigger warning on this or what, but the catalyst for me truly was about being held in a house and not just raped for an entire 2 days, but I came within an inch of my life. Like I thought I was going to die. And it was only through being able to escape out of that house that the PTSD got so dark for me. And I was talking about this with the Americans on the weekend as well. I don't even know how to describe the darkness within my mind. And I didn't realize that there was a way out, because I thought that was how life was going to be forever. And actually, at one point, I wanted to die. And the only thing that stopped me from killing myself was that I didn't want that to be the legacy that I left for my son.
Yeah.
But it was so dark that in my brain, I thought, I'll wait until he's 18 and then I'll kill myself and make it look like an accident. So I was waiting to die.
Wow.
I didn't know how to stop being, I was so scared. I was so scared of not just existing in the world, but I was so scared of, like, I couldn't even trust myself, you know? And I think it just got to a point where it was like, it's do or die. Are you going to live like this until he's 18 or you've got to fight? And, you know, I got so emotional in our session that we had just before this, because one of my clients was sharing the thing that he's taken from working with me this year is that he found the fight for life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's the one I got most emotional about with Everybody Shares. And that's why.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And you know, every time I hear it, it just breaks my heart that you went through something like that, because it's truly awful. And for you to survive that and become what you've become is honestly, like, I don't think you quite understand the power and impact of that, because as you say, you had this mindset of, I'll wait till he's 18 and then I'll get rid of myself because I cannot live with this, what happened to me. And yet somehow you found a way to move through that. So obviously at that time, the catalyst was, I'm going to survive this for him until he's 18. But where was the point where you decided, you know what? 18's not enough. Like, I'm actually going to make a bigger impact than that. Like, was there something that really kind of set that in motion for you?
So it was the starting point was the fact that living day in, day out with darkness, it was literally, so at the time he was 4. So there's a long time to go until 18. And
Yeah.
after a couple of years, I was like, I can't make it to 18 like this,
Mm-hmm.
but I also refuse to leave him with this legacy. So it was like, I have to go and find a way. I have to go and find a way. And my friend had been at me for a couple of years to go to this particular mentors program. And she kept saying, you know, come to this weekend event, come to this weekend event. And I was like, I'm not going to that bloody cult rubbish. And I think, you know, again, you get to a point where you're like, it's do or die. So I've got to try anything.
Yeah.
And I went, and that particular weekend, that man with his method completely shifted my PTSD and
Wow.
really gave me hope for what could be possible. And without a doubt, and so, Rach, you've heard me say this before, and I mean it to my core. I am the woman and the business person that I am today because of my mentors.
Mhm.
And so often we don't get taught certain things in the household, and I'm sure every parent does their best with what they know at the time. But we miss out on such fundamental things like how to value ourselves, so that we can then go and create financial abundance. And by the way, there's no nobility in being broke, right? And so the richer you can become financially, the more that you can give to the world, because all of the sudden you're not fighting for, hey, I need to get bread and milk today. You have the capacity to be of service to the rest of the world. And so mentors really are about helping us unlock the parts within us that we were born to have, but for whatever reason, the caregivers around us just weren't able to help us with those things.
That's
It's
Wow.
mentorship. It's got to be mentorship every step of the way.
yeah.
Mentorship is so powerful, and there's not enough talk about how to go and find mentors, especially for youth. You know, it's not something that you grow up hearing about as a high school student or even as a university student. People, and you would think people would talk about that because I hear a lot about it in the workplace. I
Yeah.
never heard about mentors or you should have mentors when I was in university or even in high school. It's really amazing. And there's so much that you benefit from that. It's meant to be a longitudinal relationship and good mentor relationships, even the mentors I have. Some of my mentors are now girlfriends that I go out and have a drink with because
Yeah.
we've moved past that mentor-mentee relationship. So absolutely agree with, and it's really impressive that you had, and thankfully you had such great mentors to help you through that. My
Yeah, well,
God.
but I want to be clear as well. I've had my fair share of less than desirables, but the difference I think between me and most people is that most people have a poor experience with a mentor, and then they take to social media to whinge about it and, kind of get people to buy into their victim story. But for me, I've learned so much. This year alone, I had a significant experience with a mentor who completely, in my opinion, betrayed my trust. And
Wow.
and yet I'm so grateful for him and what he did, because again, it was another one of those do or die, fight or lay down and give up. And it's contributed to exponential growth, because I really I get so excited when people treat me badly because I take it as fuel. I don't take it laying down.
Right.
There's so much power in that. And I think that's a really inspiring thought for our listeners as well, because, you know, we do get caught up in our own victim stories and our excuses and all the rest of it. And like you said, and I don't want to, like, you know, take words out of your mouth, but this is a Shani quote. It's like, use your excuses as your, as like, what's the, you say it, like you, what you, I don't want to use your words, right? You say
You couldn't even get my quote out anyway. So you can either use the excuse for why you can't, but you should actually have it be the reason why you must.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
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 So it's like if you're a single mum and you're broke and you're struggling, that's not your excuse for why you couldn't create a better life. That has to be your reason for why you must.
Right. Motivation.
Correct.
Yes.
You know, in fact, I read something, I think it was either a blog or some other interview that you gave, and I did make a note of it, so I
Me?
can
All
quote
right.
you officially. And you say, I quote, so many people are stuck in their thinking and trying to solve their problems through the thought process. But instead, you've got to get in there and take action. The clarity comes in the doing. And that's what really resonated with me. And I was thinking about that. And you're right. You know, we spend a lot of time, we're over analyzers. There's so much happening in our minds all the time. We hyperanalyze, we overanalyze, we analyze again and again. And what happens in that is that we don't actually take any steps because we're so caught up in the weeds of, well, if I do this, what's that going to look like? What if I fail? Then you get caught up in those limiting beliefs and the imposter syndrome. So you're right. Sometimes you just have to go out and take action and do it. And then you will see all the aha moments and all the realizations that come with that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I mean, I'd be surprised if there's anyone listening right now that doesn't have their own experience of trauma, by the way. And my story is not, it took me a long time to share my story because I found that when I would share it, people would then minimize their own story to it. And let me be really clear, that is not what I want, right? Sometimes people hear it and they go, well, who am I to complain? Because, oh my God, look at all the things that you had to go through. And if somebody's listening right now, kind of thinking that, I want to be really clear. My physical experience maybe and look very different to yours, but underneath all of it, we've all had the same experience, which is we've been fighting to exist and fighting for our place in the world. And so I'm sure every single person has had an experience of trauma. And that's actually why we've become overanalyzers. So what's happening in the brain is that people get stuck in the thinking because they're in fear and they're trying to make sure that whatever they do is safe, right? And so they're trying to calculate, if I do this, will it be safe? If I don't do that, will I be safe? That's all it is. And this is why we get caught up in our heads. We're trying to make sure that the bad things that have happened in the past don't happen again. But in doing so, we get into freeze mode. And from a neuroscience perspective, when I say clarity comes in the doing, there's actually a science behind that, which is that every time you take an action, another schema in your brain attaches to another schema. That's what problem solving looks like. And what you're trying to mastery and confidence, it comes from how many times can you wire together two schemas? Because eventually you've solved the problem so many times that you feel confident and you've become a master at it. And the only way that's going to happen is by actually taking the action, because then you put the schema together and it tells you what worked, what didn't. And then the next time you do it slightly better, and then another schema develops. And that's how confidence is built.
Right. Beautifully said. You know, when you were talking a little bit, just even now, you were teeing up everything that you just said right now by talking about your story, your experience, and how some people, when they hear your story, they start to minimize their own trauma. One thing I really wanted to know is, did you always have that mindset of, oh, I have to share my story to show people that you can take your trauma and do something amazing with it as a catalyst? Was there ever a thought of, oh my gosh, this is so shameful. How can I share this? Because a lot of people do look at trauma as shameful. how can I expose myself in this way to the world? You have to leave yourself completely open, completely bare, vulnerable. Was there ever a moment where you felt like that, or was your mindset completely of, I need to share my story to show people how you can overcome, and it can be a story of survival and not a story about a victim?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, there's not been one thing. It's been a process and an evolution, but absolutely not. I actually was very much in hiding for a long time. So obviously the event that happened in 2011 was with a family member, and that particular family member had said to me, if you escape, I'm going to find you and I'm going to find your son and I'm going to kill your son in front of you, and then I'm going to kill you.
Oh.
And so part of what that brought up for me, and like all rapists, for want of a better term, the other thing that they had said was that they were going to tell everybody that it was consent. And so a couple of things happened as a result of that. Number one, I changed my last name because I didn't want to be found. So Taylor is now my legal last name, but it's not my original last name. Number two, everything on social media was on lockdown, including I had no profile picture of my face. I had not even Shani Taylor as my name. It was like some mumbo jumbo stuff. And I lived in constant fear that this person was going to find us and turn up. And by the way, it was only through the work that I did with the mentor earlier this year that ended up betraying me that I was thinking about this last night. I was like, it's taken me 13 years to finally feel fully free. And what I mean by that is I'm no longer scared if that man finds me and turns up on my doorstep. And that's taken a lot to get to that point. Because I was scared that they would turn up, find me, kill my son. And not only was I scared of that, I didn't believe in myself to be able to deal with whatever happened. I was also scared. Then I started my business and I still had everything on lockdown, but I was using social media to grow a business, but everything was still private. And the reason I had it private was I was scared that they would find me and make comments on my content saying that I had consented, because this is all the stuff. This is what grooming looks like, by the way. And the grooming can stay with you for so many years, as it has done afterwards. Like, think about the way that I've had to show up with my son's safety. That kid has never been allowed to have a sleepover. He was never allowed to walk anywhere on his own because I was constantly worried that something bad was going to happen. That's a lot of fear to live with, right? And I definitely didn't want to go public with my story because I was worried that people would think there was something wrong with me. What did she do? Did she consent? Like all of that type of stuff, right? So it's been a long process. And it was only a couple of years ago where I realized that if I wanted to have bigger impact, I was going to have to go public and I couldn't keep hiding.
I mean, that story is just incredible. And also, like, having to live with such an enormous amount of fear and be able to survive and work and do all of the things that you've done. Like, unbelievable, Shani. I hope you're like constantly giving yourself a pat on the back, because the more I learn about you, the more I just think, what on earth? How did this woman come into my life? I feel very lucky about that, to be honest. Yeah. And I know it's like quite emotional to share that story. I get, as I say, I always get really emotional about that story and just think, goodness me, I don't know if I would survive something like that. So you really are like a testament to people out there who, like, as you say, may not have had a story as traumatic as yours. And I hope they haven't. I really do hope they haven't. But everyone does have some form of trauma, and we can let that trauma dictate who we are. I know that I did for a long time, let my trauma from my family become my story. It was my story. And then when I went, it doesn't need to be my story anymore. And this is something I say to other people when they talk about their trauma. I say, I understand your trauma. And trauma is something we all go through, but it doesn't need to be who you are. And I think the step is really massive, isn't it? Once you let that go, you do create quantum leaps in your life, the same way that you have yourself. So, amazing. Kudos to you and all of the prizes. But
Prizes.
yeah. So I know that when you started your business, you weren't necessarily a business coach, were you? That's not really how you started. So do you want to talk our listeners through like how you kind of started your entrepreneur journey and like how you've got to where you are?
Yeah, so it's a really great question because I didn't start as a business coach because how the heck could I? Because I didn't have credibility, right? Didn't have embodiment. Now, what I will say is before the event in 2011, I had kind of worked my way up in corporate, and I was the manager of a Drake International recruitment agency right here in Australia. So, I'd gotten to a degree of understanding business, but I certainly couldn't turn around and just go and be a business coach with that. So I started my business by creating content for other coaches, and that was the offer. And it was like, come and log in with me for 45 minutes. I'll ask you questions, take down what you say, and turn that into 5 pieces of content for you every single week. And that's where it started. And literally within 2 months, it went from me creating content to me teaching content. So then I started teaching people instead of doing it for them. And then it went to, and then so I was coaching them on their content. And then basically what happened was, it was like every time I learned something new about how to leap up in the area of business, I was like, all right, well, I'll teach that. And so I just kind of started to teach little mini programs around those things, while still content was the main thing for like a long time. When I say a long time, like 12 months. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, well, now I can teach audience building, because I had embodied that and I had demonstrated results. And so I think the key here, it's like, whether you're in corporate, whether you're a leader in an organization, whether you're an employee wanting to become a leader, whether you're in your own business, the key here is authenticity, and you only ever have to speak to what you've currently done. And I think so many people are stuck with getting recognition, validation, more income, more clients, because they're trying to project into the world what they think the world wants them to be, rather than going, no, all I know how to do is content right now, so that's what I'm going to do, right? And just let yourself be in the evolution.
Yeah.
Interesting. What I love about that is, so much of what you talk about is being proactive in this space. And I love what you said about the authenticity piece, because when you think about, especially as a business coach, when you show up for that coaching session or for that coaching client, you do have to be your authentic self in that conversation so you can help them with their own awareness. If you're putting on a mask of what you think they want you to be, then you can't help them to uncover their potential and unlock their magic, because you yourself haven't done so.
Yeah.
So amazing. Amazing. What would you say? I'm curious, what would you say for someone who is contemplating, any one of our listeners who are contemplating making the leap into starting their own business? Maybe they themselves want to be a coach on whatever topic they want to coach on. What would you say are your 3 biggest tips for how they can start and take action, as you say?
Well, it's a great question. And I think even if it's somebody, it doesn't necessarily have to be that they want to start their own business. It's like, right now, there's something within your heart that you really want to do next. And it's like, okay, so how do I get started with that thing?
Right.
And whether it's starting a business, applying for a promotion, having a tough conversation, you absolutely have to get mentorship. And I know we've spoken about this, but I cannot stress this enough, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. And so we are literally stuck by our own limitation, and you need somebody to ask quality questions to draw out from you what is aligned, what is authentic, and then match that with the strategy. So one of the I mean, I don't like to say mistakes because I don't believe that there's any mistakes, but we'll use the term loosely. But one of the mistakes that I made when I started was I had a coach or a mentor who was incredible, who was working with me on my mental and emotional well-being or my mindset, but I didn't get a business coach. And that was just so ridiculous because what it meant was I was working 18 hours a day, which, by the way, I would have worked 18 hours a day anyway, but the amount of productivity that was not happening because I was finding my way and learning in the mistakes rather than getting some, like, I think about if I had a business coach in my first 12 months, where I would be now, because I spent the first 12 months figuring it out on my own. So those 18 hours a day that I dedicated could have really been quantum leaping in a big way had I had the right support. So I think no matter what you're trying to do next, whether you're trying to have a hard conversation, start a business, find a relationship, build more wealth, master your message, refine your leadership, you need to actually get close proximity support.
Yeah.
Right. You need your own board of directors. And one thing that mentors, I will say a good mentor does is going back to what you were just saying, they help you see your blind spots. You just said that you don't know what you don't know, and you need someone to hold up a mirror and show you what those blind spots are. And that's why these mentoring relationships are so important and really part of your growth trajectory when you think about your life and your career.
Well, they're called blind spots, not vision spots, for a reason, right? And so if you knew how to find them, then they wouldn't be a blind spot. And we don't ever not have blind spots. So I think one of the things that frustrates me the most that I see just from a human behavior perspective is people go and engage with mentorship or coaching from a place of I need to fix a problem. And then that problem gets fixed. And then they go, cool, I'm good for now. And I'm like, no, there's always going to be the next thing. And we've got to approach mentorship from a space of who I want to become, not just the problems that I want to fix.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Shani, you've already achieved so much success in your life.
I don't know. The high performer in me is like, no, I haven't. It's not enough.
But what's important for you for the Shaniverse next?
I love that, the Shaniverse.
Where did we get that question from, Rachel?
I wonder.
I literally, so it's a really great question. Here's why, because I gave Rachel that question. I gave the community that question. For everybody listening, by the way, one of the things that we need to start doing is we need to start looking at how we add value to other people, because when we add value to other people, they naturally will want to take care of us, and we don't need to make offers and ask for promotions and all sorts of stuff, because it'll happen by the very nature of being a person of value. And one of the really great questions to ask, if you're wondering, how do I be a person of value, is what Rachel just said, which was, sharing with people, like, you've already achieved so much success. So, what's important to you now at this time in your life? And so to answer my question that Rachel asked so beautifully, look, there's a couple of things that I feel are really important to me as I think about the next 12 months ahead. Without a doubt, it's always about the impact and how can I reach more people. And the purpose of making money in the business for me is to put that money back into being able to reach more people. And so the next 12 months for me are really dedicated to how do I get in front of as many people as possible in the most efficient way possible. But we are going to be doing a lot of in-person events globally. We've done some this year, but that's going to be ramped up. And the other thing that's really important to me is about deepening my relationship with myself. And what that actually means is about being in relationship with others, because by being in relationship with others in various forms, they become the mirror for us. And so, that's the other thing for me. I really want to go and uncover some of my own blind spots through relationship.
Okay. I was thinking about you the other day because you've got a podcast. Shani's just started her own podcast and putting stuff on YouTube, and I thought, it's Shani Vision now.
Shani Vision.
What do you mean? Like, oh, as instead of Eurovision?
No, it's like TV, isn't it? Shani,
Oh, yeah.
it's Shani Vision.
Instead of television, it's Shani Vision.
I think you're probably trying to wrap me up, but let me tell you a funny story just on that. When I started my business, about 6 months into it, I entered into a relationship with a man. And that relationship was so volatile, you know, it was a trauma bond without a doubt. But I really at that point thought, oh my God, this is my person. And when the relationship broke up, that was even harder than being in the relationship. But one of the things that he used to say constantly throughout the relationship was, this is not the Shani show. That was like the side dig. This is not the Shani show. This is not the Shani show. And I was like, yes, it is. But anyway, and it was so funny because I had a full circle moment like a couple of maybe a month ago, because, you know, I had this person in my life, obviously, who was, again, almost like jealous of my success and saying it's not the Shani show. And then last month, my mentor, JT Fox, had me open his event, Mega Success, which is the biggest business event in the world by far. It has the biggest billionaires, millionaires, and celebrities. And I was the first person in the 18 events that he's done over the last 18 years. I was the first person that he's ever had to open the event. But I had a little chuckle to the universe, because when he announced to the community that he was going to have me open it, and he was explaining, you're also going to be interviewing and you're going to be doing this and this and this all on one day. And he said, day one is literally the Shani show. And I share that because I think it's a real recognition that to the wrong people, you will always think you're not good enough. Mm-hmm. But when you find your people, they lift you up and they unlock your magic.
Right, so right. Not everyone can handle your light that shines through.
Exactly. So find your people. That's the key.
Yeah, and you did an incredible job on that MC. Everyone was talking about it for days and days afterwards. You were the best MC. So yeah, you did a fantastic job, and I was having a little proud, oh, there's my coach moment. So just being a bit nerdy.
Thanks, Rach.
That's all right. So Shani, this has been a wonderful chat. Obviously, you're so inspiring. I did want people to learn more about you through our channel of the podcast. And also, you know, to understand that through trauma, we can become amazing and we can become great. And so you're a testament to that. So how can our listeners find you? How can they connect with you? How would you like for them to become part of the Shaniverse?
So I love Facebook, and that's where I hang out most. So you can find me there. It's just Shani Taylor with the blue tick, or you can find me on Instagram. And, you know, just come and send me a DM and come and say hello, because I manage all of my own social media and I'm always up for a chat.
That's right. Cheers.
Yeah.
And you've got your new podcast as well, haven't you?
We do. I launched a podcast with my hairdresser, by the way. And, you know, because we decided we couldn't keep this magic from the world. So you definitely need to go and check it out. It's Business Banter by the Basin. Love that.
Love that. I'm sure it's going to be absolute gold. So everybody, thank you so much, Shani, for being with us. And, you know, just keep shining.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. If we can leave you with one thought, what is something that you heard from Shani that it will inspire you to take action? If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you can share it with your friends and tag us on social media at Leading Ladies Who Lunch. Your reviews of this podcast mean so much to us. We'd love it if you could rate it and subscribe to the show.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. So subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes, and follow us on Instagram at Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Stay tuned for another great episode in 2 weeks.
Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And remember, The conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.